If you watched any, and I pretty much watched the whole Cleveland game because that game was on in my area, and a couple other games last week. This is one that I was really honing in on. Um, by all accounts, and it seems like Deshaun Watson might get suspended if all this stuff ends up becoming true. But that's
He already got arrested.
neither here nor there. We're gonna see how this is all gonna fit. I think it's gonna be DTR season here pretty soon, and we're gonna be rooting for him, of course. Go back. That was my very first Sliders episode on how good I thought DTR was, and his mom got mad that I even said anything critical about her son, which
That is
I
true.
get it, but it was 90% of it was positive. So why are you mad at me, Mama DTR? It's okay.
Do you think we can email her back and be like, "Can we get your son on the show?"
Yeah, get your son on the show so we can speak about him more highly again.
Don't show him the What the Fuchs clip though.
One thing that I wanted to see last week was what this Cleveland team would have looked like with Nick Chubb. So he's still nursing that injury he had on the same knee that he tore up in college. And we did not see him, but Jerome Ford being one of the best backup running backs in the league. On the Cowboys end, Ezekiel Elliott looks like he picked up where he left off with the Cowboys, looking pretty decent for them. But what I was really surprised with was CeeDee Lamb actually getting a couple carries in this game and actually looking pretty good while he did it. 3 carries for 25 yards, averaging 8.3 yards a carry. Dak Prescott could have had a better day, in my opinion. 19 for 32, 179 yards. He was sacked 3 times. So what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a turn of the tide of the offensive lines that he thought he had
Yes.
Previous to this regime as well. But by all accounts, there was a couple mistakes on Cleveland's end. But I did like the fact that DeMarion Overshown coming back after missing all of last year and really having his rookie season right now. 11 total tackles, 1 sack, 1 tackle for a loss, and 2 quarterback hits.
I was so high on Overshown, and then he went to the Cowboys.
Yeah, and then on the other side of that, Eric Kendricks is showing a little turn of the tide in his career, being the older gentleman on this team, and actually turning out pretty good and getting a interception along with Trayvon Diggs. So this is what we known Eric Kendricks to be, the ultimate in coverage linebacker, Mr. All Reliable in the middle of the field, and he showed that a little bit. But if you guys did not see the absolute destruction that had happened from Micah Parsons the whole game, 5 quarterback hits, him and DeMarcus Lawrence were just immediately in Deshaun Watson's face the whole game, forcing 1 fumble as well. I think the Cowboys overall have a fairly decent team. I am interested to see what they look like against the Saints defense, but the one thing that I always like to see what the rookies do because we focus on them so much. One of the guys that we didn't focus on as much this offseason was Kalen Carson. And Kalen Carson had a really decent game for them too, having 2 passes defended in the game. So it looks like he's going to be the ultimate DB for him as well, lining up there with, the Trayvon Diggs of the world. So we'll see what happens because I know Deron Bland, he's currently not out there. I think he's still battling with a foot injury, I believe he had. So we'll see what it's going to look like when all 3 of them are on the same field together and how much he's going to take in just being on the field with those guys. Now, when I'm looking at what the Saints did last week, again, you're playing a very anemic Panthers team. So of course we're going to take that with a grain of salt, but they did give him the beat down. Whenever you see a offense put up 35 points plus in a game on the NFL side, somebody is not playing defense. You don't expect that in the NFL game. You really don't, unless there's just two guys battling it out. Usually you see these type of scores towards the end of the season when people are starting to miss a lot of their key guys because of injuries. But Derek Carr, 19 for 23, 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, had, if not the best, one of the best quarterback performances of the weekend. Alvin Kamara is still as important to that team as he was 5 years ago, which, of course, I love to see that out of him. And then when you look at what their defense did, accounting for 4 sacks, 6 passes defended, and 2 interceptions. So very similar to what the Cowboys were doing their first week, getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. But it is Bryce Young, and it is that offensive line for the Saints. But when I really accounted for it, I had to look at who was the worst. Who played the worst team. And obviously the Saints played the worst team, even though it's a division rival. We've seen some good things out of the Browns defense. I mean, Denzel Ward had a really good day against the Cowboys, and he was causing fits for him the whole day. And then of course their defensive line and having 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗶𝗲𝗀𝗀 as well. Always causes troubles for a lot of teams. But when it really came down to it, the guy that I had to go with, or the team that I had to go with for this game, I don't think it's going to be any surprise to anybody. I'm going to have to go with the Cowboys on this one. I actually think it's going to be a pretty sizable victory for them as well. I believe they're going to win the game with about 14 points up, and the Saints are going to have a come to Jesus party. And again, I'm always a fan of teams getting their butt kicks at the beginning of the season, because it's going to be a good litmus test against better teams of where they can actually compete. So if I'm telling the Saints fan, don't look at this loss as a bad loss. Look at this loss as a loss that's going to help you learn a little bit more about your team and possibly your quarterback of the future as well. Can Derek Carr still do it against a really good defense with the pressure that's going to be in his face that the Panthers obviously didn't put, missing the likes of a Brian Burns and those guys too. Jeremy Chinn's not there anymore. The list just goes on and on and on.
Frankie Louvu.
Yeah, Frankie Louvu as well. So there we go. I got the Cowboys on this one. Sore, what you got?
I got the Goodyear blimp crashing into it. No, I'm kidding. So we look at kind of what the Saints did against the Panthers. They had an explosive week one. Granted, yes, against the Panthers. We mentioned all the losses that they just had. Derek Brown now potentially is out for the season. It's not good for the Panthers. But again, kind of like we mentioned with Derek Carr, went 19 for 23, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. As of week one, he is second in the NFL for passing touchdowns. They were able to hold on to the ball for 37 minutes. So, long methodical drives. Granted, the defense, they got 2 turnovers. So, how much of that was really short field opportunities for the offense, but still with a top 10 defense, you kind of are hoping that your offense can get even just 3 points. And as weird it is to say, I think the best thing that the Saints did was they didn't overutilize Taysom Hill. That has always been one of my biggest gripes with the Saints, and what has been holding them back is there will be some games where they just want to overutilize Taysom Hill. All Taysom Hill did was he just got 5 rushes for 35 yards. That was it. And then you didn't see him pretty much for the rest of the game besides those 5 rushes. You look at another gripe for this game is you look at the receiving room. It was a bit questionable. You had Alvin Kamara. He was the leading receiver. Rashid Shaheed, he had 3 catches for 73 yards, one of them on that big play, and a touchdown. Foster Moreau, he was there, 4 catches, 43 yards,
to see
touchdown.
Him back after what he's
yes,
done.
it is. I was going to mention that. Yes, it is. Juwan Johnson, 2 for 26 and a touchdown. And the biggest problem that had everybody, Saints fans, football fans, fantasy fans, just scratching their head was why Chris Olave only had 2 catches for 11 yards. Rashid Shaheed, I think, is very underrated. I think he's a very good receiver.
I have to agree with you, 100%.
A 3 on every team, a 2 on most teams, but he is not a number 1. You cannot have your star receiver, Chris Olave, one of the younger receivers and upcoming receivers in the league, have only 2 catches, especially against Dallas this week. Running game has been bread and butter for the Saints for a long, long time. Alvin Kamara had 15 carries, 83 yards, and a touchdown. Backup Jamal Williams, 11 carries, 35 yards, and a touchdown. So you have a good rotation, which was missing last year because both of them were banged up for certain amounts of time. So they're back. They're seemingly healthy, and you're going to need both of them to have double-digit carries and effective carries, albeit against the Cowboys. Also, I want to shout out to my guy, the dude that I had ranked as the #1 offensive lineman, 𝗕𝘂𝘀𝗶𝗲𝗀𝗀, because he was ranked second in rookie performances. So shout out to you, 𝗕𝘂𝘀. I always believed in you, and I'm shit. This is a tear of joy, man. I'm so happy. But Lord, you best be praying. You best be praying for 𝗕𝘂𝘀 because he got a rough matchup this week. Dallas, yes, they looked good. Obviously, they won. The Browns were a top 5 defense last year. They didn't lose a lot of pieces. So putting up 33 points against them is nothing to scoff at. We already mentioned, Dak and CD's stat line. We mentioned a little bit of Elliott. But the thing that deters me a little bit from giving them flowers, and it's not because, I'm biased and I'm an Eagles fan and Dallas sucks, blah, 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 blah. It's more so we look at Brandon Cooks got a touchdown, 6 minutes, 55 seconds left to go in the first quarter. Elliott gets a touchdown with 5 minutes, 15 seconds left in the second. And then after that, it was just Brandon Aubrey getting 40-yarders, 45-yarders, 50-yarders. KaVontae Turpin, punt return touchdown. So you really only had 2 touchdowns from the offense. The rest was your special teams, which granted, that helps win you games, obviously. I mean, Brandon Aubrey is a top 3 kicker. Potentially number 2, depending on how Justin Tucker looks the rest of the year. But Brandon Aubrey is a top 3 kicker, so that's nothing to scoff at. I'm not taking away from his performance, but it is something to just note that this man alone got 15 out of 33 of those points for you. Yep. Defense still looked great. We talked about, DeMarcus Lawrence, Micah Parsons. They got 6 sacks. They picked off Deshaun Watson twice. You do have to just wonder how much of that is just because Deshaun Watson is just no longer that guy. Nick Chubb wasn't playing. So that's stuff you got to take in account for. But despite all of that, I'm still going to go with Dallas. I still do think they are the better team. But I do think it's going to be pretty close. I think it's going to be like 6 points. And Brandon Aubrey is just going to kind of sink it with another field goal as like there's 30 seconds left and Carr and the Saints just don't have enough time to tie it up.
All right, 𝗕𝘂𝘀, wrap us up.
The impressive thing to me, most impressive thing about the Cowboys to me was their defense this past week, because kind of like Sora was saying, their offense really didn't impress me. I know they put up 33 points against a good defense, but they were, Sora mentioned all those field goals from Brandon Aubrey. He kicked 4. There was a touchdown on the punt return by KaVontae Turpin. Zeke looked solid in his return. Dak didn't play bad, but he threw for 179 yards, and Zeke had, I think, was it 40 or 60? Like, in terms of yardage, they didn't move the ball much. They were just gifted short fields, good, string together a couple solid drives. And I think a lot of that is credited to Deshaun Watson and how poorly he played. And also how well their defense did. I mean, their defense was pressuring him constantly. They had a lot of standout players on that side of the ball. The offense of both teams really didn't impress me, because when you look at New Orleans as well, out of 9 scoring drives that New Orleans had, 4 of them started in Carolina territory, and they started in the red zone twice, which they only managed 10 points from those drives. But still, like, you start in the red zone twice and you start in Carolina territory 4 times. And looking at like just how easy this Saints offense had it, the Panthers had a total of 9 drives, not including when like the last drive when the game ended. But they had 9 drives that accumulated less than 20 yards, and they had 8 total drives that got them less than 10 yards. So Carolina was, 1, not holding on to the ball for very long, and 2, they weren't moving anywhere with it. So this Saints offense was constantly being given short field after short field after short field. And, they put up 37 points, which is what you would expect against a bad defense when you're given great field positioning. It's just New Orleans really hasn't been tested at all. And while Dallas went up against a better defense, they looked good, but not great. It's just Dallas's defense looked, chef's kiss, like amazing.
Yeah.
Especially their linebackers and their front seven. Dante, you mentioned how good Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence looked, right? But I want to focus on the linebackers. And first and foremost, DeMarvion Overshown. Like, holy cow. He was out last year with an injury after getting drafted, and so this is essentially like his
This man's gonna haunt me for his entire career, isn't he?
Oh, he is, because he looked incredible. He had 11 tackles, a sack, and a tackle for loss, and each time you see him break on the football or break on a quarterback getting outside of the pocket, it looks like he shot out of a cannon. This guy has unreal speed. He showed that off in college, being a former safety out of high school. That's what he was recruited as at Texas. That speed that he has with his size is very unique, and he put it on full display against this Browns offense. And he had an incredible game next to Eric Kendricks, who, also had 9 tackles, 2 sacks, a tackle for loss, a pass breakup, and an interception. So his first game as a Cowboy went incredible as well. And then you get to Trayvon Diggs, who's back from injury, and he looked really good. He got himself an interception. So this Cowboys defense, to me, is what's really going to make the difference. I think that New Orleans is going to have a very hard time running the ball. And, I mean, New Orleans offense, I just haven't – they were given everything on a platter this past week. They executed when asked to do it, but now they're going to be facing – what looks to be a much improved unit rather than one that got drastically worse. So it's kind of hard to judge them based off of that. And I got to give credit where credit is due with the Honey Badger and Demario Davis, right? They're both some of the best at their position still and defying Father Time. But they aren't enough on the Saints defense, I think, to neutralize Dallas at the level that they need to. Because I think Dallas is going to play lights out on defense, which means that New Orleans needs to match that if they want to have a chance. And I just don't think they can, even if they have a pretty good defense, in my opinion. But I think that Dallas is going to win this one pretty comfortably. But that's who I got with this one.
Ooh, man. So Lee is going with the Cowboys, and we're just going to wrap this one up. All of us got the Cowboys on this one. So that was our first game. Since we're running up against time, and I know we got to get over to the status faction. Again, this is a short show. The Texans and Bears. I just think, go ahead, show all of ours. So we all have the Texans. The whole group has the Texans.
Yeah. This one's pretty obvious, I feel like.
I mean, you look at how Caleb Williams struggled against the Titans defense, which isn't the best. And, the Titans don't have a lot of good weapons either. They're not dealing with the Texans. This is a completely different team than what they're dealing with.
Agreed.
Yep. The next game was Tampa Bay and Lions. This was the ECG game of the week. The history. The Buccaneers and the Lions have played 62 times, and Detroit holds the edge 33-29. Interesting. Fantasy top 10. Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield ranked number 2. Mike Evans ranked number 6 at receiver. Chris Godwin ranked number 8 at receiver. Jameson Williams ranked number 5 at receiver. And Sam Laporta ranked number 8 at tight end, which is kind of surprising. But how we kind of got through this game, Khalid had the Bucks. I had the Bucks. Sora had the Bucks. Everybody has the Bucks.
No one went with Detroit.
Which is especially injury, because I know Winfield is injured and there's a couple of other injuries, but still, just
kidding. Plot twist. Everybody went with the Lions. What are we talking about here, brother? What are we talking about? Everybody went with the Lions.
I was about to say, I'm looking at my notes and I have the Lions winning. Huh.
Yeah. This is supposed to be a surprise for everybody who's supposed to go across the screen. But yeah, everybody went with the Lions. So
Khalid would have been like, because I think Khalid was leading off in this, he'd have been like, wait a minute, I didn't.
Yeah, I was like,
yeah. Yeah. So, the last thing that I had, where is my thingamajig?
Where's my super suit?
Oh, here we go. These are all the picks for the week right here. So,
we have too many sweeps.
Yeah, Green Bay for me For me and Khalid, Colts for Don, and the rest of everybody.
Really?
I have the
didn't think anybody
Titans
was
over
gonna pick
the Jets.
I didn't think
had
anybody was going to pick Green Bay.
Everybody had the 49ers over the Vikings. Seahawks for me, Don, and Tony. And then the Patriots for everybody else. Washington with a clean sweep. The Chargers almost with a clean sweep. Tony went against the grain and picked Carolina.
Oh, gosh.
Jaguars with a clean sweep over the Cleveland Browns. Baltimore with a clean sweep over the Raiders. We were very split on the Rams versus Cardinals. Khalid and Tony picking the Cardinals there. Very split on the Steelers and Denver. Everybody picked Denver except for me and Don. Almost a clean sweep against with the Chiefs over the Bengals except for Tony. Clean sweep with the Texans and clean sweep with Philly.